Let's explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
All right, good morning, Badlandia. Welcome to Badlands Daily.
It really feels like the cat with the laser pointer. It's like you've led the cat up to the top of the building, and now you're leading it over the edge.
President Trump is rebalancing trade around the world and making things more fair for the American people.
I think that anytime the deep state can like overcapitalize in whatever situation they have, they're going to.
But the rest of it is a very well organized and well funded color revolution operation of the type they run all over the world again and again and again to destabilize entire society.
All right, good morning, Badlandia. Welcome to Badlands Daily, joined here on a Tuesday by Gordon, the ghost of bearded Patrick Henry. That's what I'm going with. How you doing, brother? Looking good,
I'm great.
Man.
I'm great. How are you today?
I am living my best life. We'll go ahead and shut that down. It's coming in nice, man.
Yeah. I even shaved it. I even did like a solid trim yesterday. So this is like post trim.
Man, you gotta embrace the length.
Well, it's like your bushes, man. Like your bush, like you're trying to grow your bushes out, and like you get the little random branches that grow out, and it's like it gets kind of gross when So you just trim the hedges and everything even, and then it grows and it keeps growing, right? So you get a nice full growth pattern. Real quick, shout out to Rise Attire.
Oh, what do we got here? Oh, look at that. Yeah. Look at that.
Yeah, so Rise Attire they've been asking me about this for a long time, and I finally sent them like as original of a file as I could find, because I drew this thing like 10 or 11 years ago, just randomly, to send to my buddies as a joke on our email list. And yeah, they turned it into a shirt. So you go to badlandsmedia.tv/rise. And they're selling that in the shop from Rise Attire. So shout out to them. Great job. And Adrian from Rise will be on the Book of Trump on Monday to do part 2. He just released his part 2 of he's doing a series on the fashion industry and like the satanic occultism of that. So he'll be on the Book of Trump to talk about that this coming Monday.
That is badass. They you saw the picture that they put out the other day of the new excavators that they ordered down for the border?
Yeah, you tagged me in it. That's hilarious. That's so funny. So they want to dig a trench now at. I mean, dude, when I sent this to the White House, this like it's a total joke. I was just like, all right, here you go, White House. Total joke, but it's a good idea. I mean, digging a trench in the Rio Grande and making it like a legit moat as like a defensive fortification. Is that something, by the way, they do in the military? Do the engineers actually use moats as defensive? Is that a thing anymore? Or is that just like a medieval thing?
Nah, we don't. I mean, moats, you got fighting trenches, like you'll dig fighting holes and trenches, but mortar pits and that kind of thing. But moats, not so much. We have HESCOs, which are actually invented by, I believe, a U.S. service member. And these are big, like 10-foot tall barriers that you fill up. They're like burlap sacks that you fill with sand. And, they probably weigh a couple tons and nothing gets through them. They're, 4 foot wide, full of sand. So any ordnance that hits them stops dead on its tracks. So more building those, and you can stack them too. You can put them like 3 high. So you build like a 30-foot wall, improv. And we don't build moats or anything like that, but
make moats great again, bro. Like make moats great again.
Well, I mean, if we could mobilize equipment like they put down at the border or that they bought for the border, would they say they bought 3 of them or something like that?
I thought it said it in the post that you tagged me, and it said 25. And those things, those
Huge.
things were massive. I mean, that like I didn't even know they made backhoes that big, that they made excavators that.
Let me see if I could find that picture real quick. I know I tagged you in it.
I think I can probably find it because I reposted it.
Oh, there you go. See if you can find that. I'll get to our sponsors first.
Sure.
And then see if you can find that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to take a second and talk about Native Path Collagen. First of all, collagen is not just about nails or your skin. As we get older, our bodies stop producing as much of this critical protein starting in our late 20s, as a matter of fact. And that's just when your joints can start aching. Recovery slows down and everything just feels harder. This specific collagen is grass-fed, pasture-raised, and designed to support joints, bones, mobility, skin, hair, all the stuff that we tend to lose with age. No weird taste, no complicated routine. Just add it to your coffee or smoothie and it's done. It's just part of your daily routine. Right now, you can get a special bundle deal at a fraction of the retail price and free shipping. This offer is only available at getnativepath.com/Badlands. That's getnativepath.com/Badlands. If you've been thinking about supporting your body instead of just pushing through the aches and pains, go check it out. The link is in the show notes. Again, that site is getnativepath.com/Badlands. And I've told you guys numerous times, my wife and I add this to our coffee every single morning, and it's fantastic, man. All right. You found it?
Yeah, I found it.
Make it full screen. These things are huge.
Yeah,
you can mute it. I've never seen excavators this big. I've seen, cranes and everything else this big, but never excavators.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of fake news because this guy, John Jackson, posted, I don't know who this is, but he says has recently purchased 25 of these and is planning to dig a trench on the southern border. And then somebody says the Trump administration has not purchased excavators or announced plans for a southern border trench. This video shows a mining excavator unrelated to border security, and the guy responds saying it was a joke. So, but you know what? Like we should get the momentum going for this, because that thing, I mean, the bucket on that thing, that could dig a trench across the southern border that I think you could stock with alligators and sharks and whatever, and piranhas, and you could really make a deterrence with that and save a lot of money, I think, on border security.
Heck yeah. Well, oh well. I was posting it. I was tagging you in it as a joke. I didn't, research it.
Yeah. I looked into it for a second. I didn't see any stories, and I was like, all right, well, this is real. This will become a major headline in the next couple of days, and it didn't. So.
All right, well, let's jump into the news. Before we do that, if you have not done so yet, please smash that thumbs up. Helps us out tremendously. And first story of the day, this is really tragic, man. Minnesota Republican candidate for governor, Jeff Johnson, has suspended his campaign after his 22-year-old daughter was stabbed to death.
No way.
Yeah, now this was allegedly, she was stabbed to death by her husband, who was 23. He's also in the hospital right now with what they call suicide wounds. Like, I guess he tried to murder suicide with a knife, which is very gruesome. Yeah, so absolute prayers go out to that family, and just tragic. So
for sure, man. I mean, the mental health, not that we don't jump to conclusions, but whenever you hear murder suicide, sounds like a mental health crisis, and that's a epidemic in our endemic in our society now, that needs to be addressed along with the drug culture and everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a rough year. Well, year from time to time for Minnesota in terms of politics. You had the two state senators, that one was assassinated and the other was two were assassinated, and then a family member that was shot, and then of course the Vance Bolter, the Praetorian Guard guy that was allegedly going for Klobuchar, and also allegedly at the discretion of Tim Walz. But yeah, it's been a rough year for Minnesota.
That's a crazy statistic, and when you pair that with everything else happening in Minnesota, I mean, it's like a third world country, man. This is the stuff that happens in banana republics. Like when people talk about Central America or the Middle East or Africa, this is what happens. Is their politicians being regularly assassinated, living under threat, having to drop their campaigns because of tragedy or fear for their life. and then like just the color revolution, obvious tactics that are happening in Minneapolis.
Yeah, you think of, and I know it's not particularly, necessarily a third world country, but Mexico. We always hear about, especially because it's our southern border, but politicians being executed. Last year I think there were like 2 beheadings of mayor candidates and shootings. It's just, yeah, that's crazy. Yep. But yeah, prayers for Dr. Johnson, and we hope, there's nothing you can hope for just other than justice. But let's jump into this story here. Kelly Loeffler talking about California fraud. It's like they're beginning to move on from Minnesota and get into California. But I want to point out, I'm gonna segue here. Well, not segue, but I'm gonna go on a little bit of a hole here, because they make they partnered up with somebody that's kind of interesting. But check this out.
I'm here in San Diego, standing at an address that is registered to 14 businesses that took $2 million in pandemic-era loans. Those loans haven't been paid back, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. Today, the SBA is announcing we're suspending 112,000 California borrowers who took potentially upwards of $9 billion. We're going to continue to work with our federal partners to ensure accountability for COVID-era fraud that the Biden administration tried to sweep under the rug. And just like Minnesota, California is another state whose socialist welfare policies have invited fraud. Well, the buck stops here. We're not looking the other way. We're prosecuting. There's going to be more to come.
All right, so we got that announcement. Now this is the actual press release that they put out. It said U.S. Small Business Administration has suspended 111,620 California borrowers amid suspected fraudulent activity across the SBA pandemic-era loan programs. These borrowers received 118,489 paycheck protection programs and economic injury disaster loans, totaling over $8.6 billion. Now, I don't know what they mean by suspended. I guess that means suspended from borrowing from the SBA. I don't know what that term means, but yeah, this is what I found interesting. Since day one, the Trump SBA has worked to crack down on an estimated $200 billion in pandemic era fraud that went unaddressed during the Biden administration. The agency recently partnered with Palantir to expand the nationwide investigation into PPP and EIDL abuse, and continues to coordinate with federal law enforcement partners to pursue recoveries, civil penalties, and criminal sentences where appropriate. And that led me to this website, FedScoop, where they talk about the Palantir contract back in January. Small Business Administration turns to Palantir after Minnesota fraud allegations sparked national probe. And it says the Small Business Administration signed a $300,000 contract with the data analytic and software giant Palantir. The contract's description read, quote, SBA fraud prevention pilot and boot camp, and has a projected end date of April 4th. That seems like a really cheap price.
I was going to say that. I was like, that is a remarkable number.
Return on investment.
Considering it's Palantir, I mean, you would expect that number to be in the billions, but
well, yeah. That's the thing that's concerning to me is this a tit for tat? Is Palantir, and I still have a lot of questions about.
Oh wow, like so many questions about Palantir is like one of the biggest just enigmas, like just question marks, because you talk about like Skynet and like taking over like the technocracy, like all the bad elements, the bad dystopian concerns and fears over technology in the golden age. Like Palantir would be right at the top of the list of potential threats.
Yeah, we've had this discussion before, and it's kind of like people in the normie magosphere are kind of like rooting for this because they're like, oh well, Palantir's aligned with our beliefs and everything like that. Well,
yeah. Are you kidding me? It's a bureaucracy. It's like that. That's like saying a government's aligned with your beliefs. It's like, they might be today. And by the way, might be is like emphasize that, like, and might be like, how do you actually know that? Like they do one thing that you like, that doesn't mean they're aligned with you. It means they could be placating you. They could be doing something subversive for sure.
Yeah. So when I see the Small Business Administration signing a contract for $300,000 for a prevention pilot and boot camp, I mean, it's a pilot, so maybe there's going to be more on the back end. 300,000 is just to see if this gets off the ground and works, or is it like nothing's free. If something is free, you're the product, that kind of concept. It says the contract was made public just days after the Small Business Administration Secretary Kelly Loeffler announced that the agency had suspended 6,900 Minnesota borrowers for alleged fraud. Now, I wonder if those 6,900, if that came from information that was provided by Palantir, or if this sparked the contract with Palantir. It doesn't necessarily say there. But it says, when asked about the Palantir contract, Small Business Administration spokesperson Maggie Clemens wrote that, quote, "We're now expanding our investigations nationwide as part of a broader zero tolerance policy on fraud. The contract marks Palantir's first public agreement with the Small Business Administration, underscoring expansion beyond defense contracting for the federal government. Palantir is also quietly working with the Education Department on its revamped foreign funding portal and is in consideration for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services National Provider Directory project." Now, admittedly, Ghost, Palantir is not like it's not like my focus of my research and everything else. So I'm just broadly familiar with Palantir and all that. I know Chris is really deep into the Palantir kind of research, and I'm wondering if how does Palantir align with Doge and Elon Musk specifically? Is there a relationship there?
Well, I'm with you that it's not my line of country in terms of like research and being highly informed on it. I do know enough that Palantir is Peter Thiel, and Peter Thiel and Elon Musk have a pretty rocky history. I mean, Peter Thiel like kicked Elon out of PayPal, whatever, 25 years ago. And then I think he kicked him out, maybe a Palantir or maybe a related company, but they definitely have a rocky relationship. And Thiel is just one of those people, like one of the enigma of enigmas. And I tend to lean more towards not trusting that guy because of all the stuff he's created and done. And of course, JD Vance, I think, owes a lot to Thiel and like just that whole nexus of people for like the start of his political career. So that's a little concerning too. All this stuff is, bicamerally. You could just look at, okay, is this the technocratic takeover of America? Is this like the new world order that George Bush promised? Or is this white hats using the weapons of the enemy against the enemy? I mean, everybody was scratching their head in 2020 when Trump and the SBA started putting out just like giving away money. Right. The company, the small business I was working for, capitalized on that just like everybody else did. But there was so much paperwork. And I mean, there were people at our office who just stopped basically working and just focused on filling out that paperwork full time for a period of time, because that's how much paperwork there was to jump through the hoops to jump through to get, to make sure that you were doing everything by the law and not like over requesting funds. I wonder if a lot of that was like a honey trap. I wonder if that was like putting the pot of honey out and waiting for all the flies to come in and then capturing all the flies. I wonder that. The SBA, remember, was being run by Linda McMahon at the time, right? She was
was it the SBA or the Department of Education?
No. She was the SBA in the first administration. The second administration, she's Department of Education. So now she's and now look at what's happening with the Department of Education. They're doing the same thing. They're hunting down all the misuse of funds. That makes me think that Linda McMahon is like one of Trump's like bounty hunters. Like she's going out and maybe trying to find these people that are doing this stuff, these criminals. Because if you just cut off the money and just like stop putting the money out, then the criminals like scatter and then they figure out other ways to engage in crime. You set out the pot of honey, like I said, the criminals all come to you, and then I don't think that's entrapment. I think that's just criminals, falling for a trap. So I don't know. There's a lot of different ways you can engage with this and look at it. I have no problem with the government going after people who are earnestly seeking to steal tax dollars and like embezzle tax dollars. I think that's insane. Those tax dollars should not be available to the public, in my opinion. Like that is communism, that is socialism, all the things that we criticize like socialism for. That is what that is. I looked it up. It says the SBA does not normally give out loans. They did during COVID. That was like a unique circumstance. But typically, regularly, what they do is they facilitate loans to small businesses from lenders, and they guarantee a portion of the loan, which reduces the lender's risk and makes it easier for small businesses to get financing on favorable terms. So I think when they say that they're suspending these businesses from the SBA, they mean that they're not going to facilitate loans for them anymore, which is going to make it harder for them to get capital. So I think that's what that is. But you know, the federal government, in my opinion, should not be guaranteeing anything. Like we shouldn't be facilitating, like we shouldn't be guaranteeing loans for people, including students, including small businesses. Now I'm open to being convinced otherwise. Like if you can present data and arguments to me that say, hey, if we do this, here's the economic impact, here's how it actually facilitates small business and helps the middle class and helps, you know, the little guy. Okay. Like I'm open to those arguments. Let's have that discussion though. Let's have the debate. Let's have the back and forth, because my guess is that there's probably a lot of larger companies and corporations who don't need that money, who are like taking advantage of that situation.
Well, I mean, we're talking here explicitly about PPP and EIDL loans, which, you know, weren't like, you know, those aren't like get along loans to improve your business. This is the government shutting us down. And this is the only relief that we're going to be able to get. Of course, these people, right. But these people, of course, all manipulated that. Now, the problem I have with this type of access, and I think that this is something that, this is why I wonder about the relationship with Musk and Thiel and with Peter Thiel. And I wonder, you know, how much of this was already mapped out during the Doge era, right? And how much of this was just a matter of execution and timing. We've seen it go from Minnesota, where we got the expose there. Now it's transitioning over to California. I did say that I thought that they should go to a red state first, Ohio, Texas, Florida, a state like that, and do the expose down there first before moving into California. Because California, if you thought Minnesota, the color revolution in Minnesota was bad, wait till you see what they're going to do in California. Because as more and more of this fraud comes out there, and we've got some more stories on the fraud here, it's going to get rougher and rougher out there. But let's go ahead and jump into this story here. Kristi Noem putting this out on X. I'm urgently calling on Gavin Newsom to agree not to release the 33,179 criminal illegal aliens in California's custody back into the public without notifying ICE. The crimes of these illegal aliens include 399 homicides, 3,300 assaults, almost 3,200 burglaries, 1,000 robberies, 8,300 dangerous drug offenses, and 1,900 weapons offenses, and 1,200, almost 1,300 sexual predatory offenses. Governor Newsom, in response, said California follows the law, and we work with ICE to remove violent criminals, not innocent families. What we especially don't do is play politics with public safety or spread misinformation. Google is free, Kristi Noem. And this led the United States attorney. This is what's his position? He's not the actual U.S. attorney. He's like the first assistant, Bill Esaley, to say that's a lie. California law prohibits county jails from handing over inmates to immigration authorities. It's illegal for them to honor a detainer, even if they wanted to. Now, it seems like, now this is from the ACLU, so take it with a grain of salt. But according to the California Values Act passed in 2019, it seems like both sides are telling half-truths here. The California Values Act, Senate Bill 54, ensures that no state and local resources are used to assist federal immigration enforcement. Police and sheriffs cannot ask your immigration status or share your personal information, like your home address, with ICE, Border Patrol, unless it's publicly available. It says if the police or sheriff arrest you, they cannot let immigration agents interview you without your written consent, which is absurd to me, and cannot tell immigration agents when you will be released or transfer you to their custody, with some exceptions. And that's the key word there, the some exceptions. And it says local law enforcement can choose to notify ICE of your release or transfer if you have certain convictions, such as state prison felony convictions, most other felony convictions within 15 years, or higher level misdemeanors within 5 years. So it's both sides are telling half truths here, right? Newsom saying we cooperate. Well, apparently not, because you got 33,000 inmates right now that are illegal and you're not cooperating with getting them out of the country. But Esaley's also kind of half wrong in saying that, it's your law that you can't do this. Well, the law states if it's a conviction, a felony conviction, that they can if they so choose. So it's not like the law says we're not working with ICE at all. But to be fair, 33,000 is a big freaking number, to have without the cooperation of ICE getting in there.
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't understand just from a common sense, just pragmatic standpoint, how what you just read is not considered subversion against the federal government. Like how, because the optics that they're presenting and the argument they're presenting is sentimental. It's emotional blackmail. They're like, we're protecting, the downtrodden. We're protecting the little guy from the government. That's the angle that they're playing to try to, tug at the heartstrings. But the reality is, if you change the optics and you're like, all right, they're bringing in military age men from a specific country, doesn't matter what country that is hostile to the United States, and they're allowing those men to form communities in California or whichever state it may be, and then those men are taking over like block by block, like the mafia does, through coercion, through racketeering, through like all of the tactics that organized crime syndicates use. That, like what I just laid out, is a scenario that has happened in the United States, not facilitated necessarily by the government, although I think maybe that has happened, but obviously done by like the Italian mafia, right? The Jewish mafia, like that has happened. We know that's happened. There's been court cases about it. So how could that not potentially be what is occurring here with the California state government? And when they're saying that we're not going to cooperate with the federal authorities to make sure that kind of thing is not happening, how is that not subversion? How is that not treason against the American people?
Yeah. Before we move on, we're going to stay on this topic. I do want to talk about a sponsor real quick. Everybody is talking about those weight loss injections because the results are so dramatic. They work by lowering blood sugar and reducing your appetite. So what if you're looking to lose the weight, but you're not interested in painful weekly injections, especially when you hear about some of those intense side effects? That's why doctors created a weight loss supplement called Lean, and the results are remarkable. The studied ingredients in Lean have been shown to lower your blood sugar, burn fat by converting it into energy, and curb your appetite and cravings so you're not as hungry. But listen, Lean is not for the casual dieter with only a few pounds to lose. The doctors at Brickhouse Nutrition created Lean for frustrated dieters with 10 or more pounds to lose. Let's get you started with 20% off and free rush shipping so you can add Lean to your healthy diet and exercise plan. Visit takelean.com and enter promo code Badlands for your discount. Again, that's promo code Badlands at takelean.com. All right. Let's jump back in. We've got a couple more DHS stories to get to. Fox News, I had this one up yesterday. I didn't get a chance to cover it. DHS fires senior CBP official for allegedly leaking sensitive information. This was, now I did briefly mention with Zach yesterday the post that Fox had last week about the ICE signal gate kind of theory. And this is maybe the person that's been leaking that information. I don't know, because we speculated how they were able to get driver's license and license plate readers and data so quickly. But maybe this was it. It says the official, who's unnamed, was marched out of the CBP office in D.C., quote, as DHS law enforcement face an 8,000% increase in death threats, leaking law enforcement sensitive information is abhorrently dangerous, said DHS spokesperson, a DHS spokesperson. DHS is agnostic about your standing, tenure, political appointment, or status as a career civil servant. We will track down leakers and prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law, end quote. The news comes just days after Fox has uncovered a underground communications network by using anti-U.S. immigration and customs enforcement agitators across the country. That's the color revolution that Cam Higbee uncovered. I just really don't like Fox taking credit for that. I didn't really see anything substantively new in their reporting on this compared to what Higbee put out, but it's like they just repackaged it and put it out in a thread. And I thought that was disingenuous, but at least 13
many such cases when it comes to garbage organizations like Fox News.
Yeah. At least 13 database systems are known to store the data, which includes personal information as well as photographs, uniform details, behavior patterns, phone numbers, and other sensitive items. That's the expose that they had. It's unclear whether the officer who was fired on Thursday had any involvement in signal group activities. And that's the gist of that story. Doesn't even name. I don't think the person to this day has still been named. I don't believe. We got a lot on DHS, man. DHS has now put out a database. This was interesting. DHS launched the wowdhs.gov, where Americans can see the criminal illegal aliens that they're arresting, their crimes, and the communities that they were removed from. ICE arrested more murderers, sex offenders, and drug traffickers from American communities. And here's the website here. And dude, there's like 2,000 pages of this. This is crazy. Homicide, burglary, sexual assault, fraud, sexual abuse of a minor.
Wait, scroll up a little minute. It says the top, like at the top of each name, which country they're from. I mean, zoom in a little more. Somalia, Mexico, Sierra Leone. Zoom in. Vietnam,
Cuba,
Laos. I mean, there's a lot of like African and Southeast Asian people there. And like Trump was saying, it's not like these people that came in during the Biden administration, and even probably before then, are from, Central America. These are people that are coming from all over the world.
Dude.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
You've got, let's see, I mean, here's Afghanistan, Mexico. We got kidnapping and rape with a weapon, assault, larceny, aggravated assault of a police officer, strong arm robbery, domestic violence, possession of a weapon, sexual assault, neglect of a child, molestation of a minor. I mean, these are heinous, but let's see. We got 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 per page, and you've got 20,000 or 2,000 pages. That's almost 20. That's more than 25,000 people that they have. And, I don't know if the crimes themselves progressively get worse or excuse me, not worse, but better, like, lesser misdemeanors and things like that.
Less severe. Yeah.
Let's check that out. Let's just randomly pick.
Just go to like one of the,
go to the end. Let's go to the end.
Well, yeah. And so while you're doing that, man, just from just common sense, first principles, because I hate all the minutia and the semantics that these lawyers like to play when they're, trying to blackmail us emotionally. Like the idea of a foreign country taking all of their criminals, right, emptying out their prisons, as Trump said, putting them on planes and sending them to the United States, and then willing actors in the United States, whether they work for the government or they work for the NGOs or whatever, meeting them at the airport, putting a blanket around them, handing them cash and saying, get in this taxi cab, it's going to take you to this place and you're going to live here. And then those people go out and commit acts of terrorism on the American communities, American people. That is an act of war. It doesn't matter if they're all being coordinated or facilitated or if they're enlisted or anything like that. You are taking people and monsters and putting them in the American communities and for the purpose of destroying and destabilizing the American society. That is an act of war. It is like it's a newer iteration of warfare, but that is warfare. Anybody who is assisting and aiding and abetting that on the American side is a traitor and should face a traitor's punishment, in my opinion. So why are we like, this should be the most aggressive crackdown, not just on these people that are on this list, but the people, more importantly, facilitating it at the government level and the nonprofit level.
Yeah, they don't get any better, by the way. This is page 2081, and you've got homicide, hit and run, exploitation, sexual exploitation of a minor, sex performance and sex offense, sexual assault,
Haiti, Vietnam, Laos. What's that last one? I can't read the last one. Bahamas,
Mexico, Laos,
Mexico,
Laos.
Taiwan, Mexico, Canada, Guatemala. Yeah, I mean, dude, this is insane. Like this is a foreign invasion. When Trump calls it a foreign invasion, he's being 100% accurate. This is actually, in a lot of ways, this is worse than bringing in like a military, because at least the military would be uniformed and like we would be able to tell who's who, right? This is like these people are wearing civilian clothes and acting like they're just American citizens, and then they go out and they do this kind of stuff, kidnap kids, engage in white collar crime, and then of course like the violent crime. I mean, acts of terrorism, acts of warfare. The military 100% should be involved in repelling this invasion.
Yep. All right. So just one other thing I want to point out on the post. I thought this was kind of hilarious to show you how awful the media is. On the Homeland Security post, you have this post here from David Levitt, who is an award-winning multimedia journalist with bylines on CBS, Axios, Yahoo, The Examiner. And he asks, why do we want to see them? To the to the DHS database there? Why do we want to see this? You're a journalist and you're not at all curious about the people that are being arrested by ICE. Oh, that's because you're a fake journalist and you just want to keep saying that all they're doing is arresting families and innocent people and sending kids back to countries. That's the media in this country right now.
Yeah, and you know, the question is, who is paying those people? Like who pays their mortgage? Who gives them a paycheck? Follow the money. It's like, okay, well, they're being paid by CBS. They're being paid by the parent company of CBS. They're being paid by, you know, whoever, ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, Fox News, doesn't matter. You follow the money though, and you start to realize that they have I mean, you don't realize, you know this from day one. They have an agenda, and they're operating on behalf of interests who, if you follow the money far enough, that money probably connects back to the NGOs who are facilitating this whole invasion anyway.
Yep. Just this little clip here. This is the face tattoo drag queen Antifa tough guy that called everybody down to his block to fight ICE and then went on the run as soon as ICE showed up for the fight. This guy here, not a smart idea to spit on federal agents.
I mean, that's assault, obviously.
That's assault, yes.
Yeah. And I mean, if you want to take it a step further, if the guy's infected with something and he spits on them and then they get infected, that's biowarfare. Yep. So it's like I have no sympathy for someone who does something like that. It's like, okay, throw the effing book at that guy.
Yep. Jumping into this story here from Fox News, Minnesota whistleblower, DHS whistleblower, their state level Department of Health, whistleblower details smear campaign after reporting fraud concerns. Now, this is kind of an ongoing story. This story came out, 2 months ago when the whole thing in Minnesota first kicked off, and now bringing it back out. And I think, to my knowledge, this is the first time that we actually got a name, the whistleblower's real name. It says Faye Bernstein, who has worked for the Minnesota Department of Health and Human Services for 2 decades in contract management and compliance, said that she was subjected to a quote unquote smear campaign for trying to make leadership aware of illegal contracting practices. She said she was called a quote unquote racist and that her work responsibilities were diminished. Quote, "There's just a continuous effort to stifle you, to shut you up, and it's impossible to overcome," Bernstein said. This is, of course, in relation to up to $9 billion that was stolen through a network of fraudulent fronts posing as daycare centers, food programs, health clinics, and we're finding out that expands much further beyond that. Hospice, transportation services, interpreters, translators, I should say. Bernstein wrote in a letter that, quote, about the nearly unbearable retaliation. That's a direct quote that she faced, including being, quote, trespassed from all DHS owned or leased property and investigated at a great cost to the state. She goes on to mention that she's raised these concerns eternally and escalated them all the way to the governor's office and the external oversight bodies, but the response was always the same. And then, of course, she says, "I'm a Democrat and I've always voted Democrat, but this fraud is not being invented by Republicans." And she says, quote, "I see this every day and it's not make-believe. And as far as being a Democrat, right now, we have to have a governor who is willing to tackle this. And it doesn't matter if they're a Republican or a Democrat." So breath of fresh air, but whistleblower intimidation is a big deal. And every single time that's done, anybody that's participated in that has committed crimes. And
sure,
hopefully they're investigated, man.
My real question though, Brian, and I will continue to keep going back to this because I think that this is the people at the very top of the list of our target list that we should be targeting for investigation. And by investigation, I don't mean like the authorities investigating them. I mean, I want that to happen, of course, but like citizen journalists, like we should be investigating them. Like citizens should be going out and investigating these people and then coming back and sharing their findings with one another. That's the collaborative effort that I think the whole Q movement was spawning, and that was what was supposed to spin out of the Q movement. And it did to a great extent, but a lot of people seem to have lost that plot. The Republicans, how many Republicans are involved in this? I want to know how many Republicans are involved in this kind of stuff. Because the Democrats are open about it. They're very honest that they oppose this stuff and that they want to stand in the way. They campaign on it. But the Republicans, lie and they say they're against this stuff, and they pretend to be like the hero, and then if we find out later that they actually are in bed with these people. And those, I think, are the worst kinds of traitors. Those are the worst kinds of subversive liars. And I want to know who those people are, because those people need to be made an example out of in terms of law enforcement and public accountability. Because we are never going to retake our sovereignty if we continue to put our trust and faith in an organization that is actually subversive and leading us into a dystopian future.
Spot on. I think we're done with, this was kind of interesting. Ed Martin put this post out yesterday. All this chatter about Todd Blanche and me is fake news. I'm proud to work for Donald Trump with Pam and Todd for a historic year of Trump mercy. 2025 Trump pardons gave victims of weaponization life. Let's talk more about what the president's done and what he'll do in this 250th year. Very interesting post. Because again, there was a lot of concern about Todd Blanche allegedly firing Ed Martin from the weaponization group, not from DOJ as a whole. And then, it came out, well, President Trump appointed him. So if President Trump appointed him directly, nobody can fire him except President Trump. But apparently, he posted right after Ed Martin, right after the word came out, he posted the picture of him and President Trump in the Oval. Then the next day, he posts the picture of, maybe a couple days later, he posts the picture of him and Todd Blanche. And immediately I was like, was this a canary trap? That was the first instinct that I put out there. I said, was this a canary trap to see who's leaking in the DOJ? And then what do we get after everything's said and done and the news gets out there and gets a hold of this? Ed Martin comes out and says, rug pull. Me and Todd are still buddies. I'm still around here. Everything you're saying about him is fake news. Very interesting. Let's jump into this story here from CBS News. We got a few court stories. Appeals court endorses Trump policy of holding many ICE detainees without bond hearings. In a 2-1 decision, a panel of federal judges at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals said that the Trump administration had properly reinterpreted an immigration law last year to disqualify many unauthorized immigrants from being able to ask an immigration judge to be released on bond. Previously, immigrants who had lived in the U.S. unlawfully for years were generally eligible for bond hearings. Mandatory detentions had been historically limited to recent border crossers and those convicted of certain crimes. But the Trump administration took the position that anyone who entered the U.S. illegally, irrespective of how long ago, is subject to mandatory detention during their deportation proceedings. Amen. Quote, the text says what it says, regardless of the decisions of prior administrations, the opinion read. In any event, that prior administrations decided to use less than their full enforcement authority does not mean they lacked the authority to do more. So basically, the judge said, hey, previous administrations let these people go, so President Trump should do the same. And the judges said, no, previous administrations circumvented the law, interpreted it their own way, and decided that that's what they're going to do. They're going to let the people that have been here for, and that's the other thing that's not clear here. What do they mean by have been here for a period of time? Are we talking about a year, 5 years, 20 years? What are we talking about in that regard? Because the Biden administration started their border surge 5 years ago. And, somebody that first initially crossed over has now been living in the United States for 5 years. They've probably got, at least they're starting to sprout roots in the country. And so when they get removed like that, is that what they're talking about in this case here? But either way, I mean, the law is the law, and Trump can interpret it correctly. And, if he wants to do this, and tell the Democrats, hey, we're done with your soft interpretation of these laws. This is what more judges need to do. President Trump has been properly interpreting the law. He's just taking away from the people that have been manipulating it and using it to their own, personal agenda. All right, we will jump into this story here from Politico. Judge blocks enforcement of California's law banning masks for ICE agents. This is basically just saying that the only reason they're going to do this is because they didn't apply the law to local California police as well. So the judge says you can absolutely pass a law saying that ICE cannot wear masks while they're conducting enforcement, but you have to apply it to all of them. It says in a 30-page decision, the judge said California's No Secret Police Act appears to violate the Constitution's Supremacy Clause by discriminating against the federal government because the law's provisions do not apply to state law enforcement officers. The judge did turn down the federal government's request to block the No Vigilantes Act, which would require most local, state, and federal law enforcement personnel to display their name or badge number while on duty. Senator Scott Wiener, who is a disgusting politician and authored that mask ban, said that he will make new legislation requiring the state to comply with that law as well. So they're trying to unmask the federal agents there. This is kind of a unique situation. And I, broadly, I don't think that law enforcement should be wearing masks like that in everyday operations that they're conducting. However, they're in a color revolution, and they have an organized system that is being funded by God knows who, that is attempting to, essentially destroy their lives, go after families. And so, like, I hate, giving the benefit of the doubt here, or saying, give up a little safety for a little liberty kind of thing. It's like on the opposite foot here, like allow the law enforcement to have a little bit of anonymity in order to protect their families. But at the same time, how often do you see a color revolution taking place at this scale in the United States?
Yeah, we're conflating a lot of different things here. So we're conflating, and this is why I think the military really should be handling this. Like DHS should not exist, in my opinion. All of those ICE agents should be brought into the military. They all should be working as members of the military, right? I'm sure they're all very highly trained, and I'm sure they're all very qualified to, meet the qualifications to be enlisted, right? We're conflating law enforcement with a military campaign, because this is a military campaign, in my opinion, because they're not going in there to target American citizens necessarily who are, breaking the law. Although that probably does happen when American citizens intervene and they try to stop them from doing their job. Yeah, you're going to get in trouble. They're there to identify and target foreign invaders who are invading our country and trying to destroy our civilization. That is what's happening. So those are two different things. Law enforcement is, preventing Americans who break the law from imposing their will on other Americans, right? That's the idea of law enforcement. There shouldn't be non-Americans on American soil engaging in criminal acts. That does happen because people are here on visas, etc. So yeah, in that case, it is law enforcement. But again, the premise here is this is a military operation, in my opinion. This is a military campaign against foreign invaders who are here invading this country. So that's where they're conflating two things, because I agree with the idea that law enforcement officials there should be mechanisms in place to hold law enforcement officials accountable when they overstep, right? Like when a bad cop engages in bad cop behavior, they should be held accountable. But this is not law enforcement, in my opinion. This is, like I said, a military campaign, and you wouldn't ask, like soldiers to wear a big name tag on the battlefield and to identify themselves. Hey, here's my social security number. Here's my name. If the guys that I'm fighting on the other side of the battlefield want to zoom in on that and take a picture of it and then go threaten my family or, target my family back home. Again, that would be an asinine strategy, like an asinine thing to do if you were asking war fighters to do that. So they're conflating these issues that individually, when separated, do make sense. And the logic does track that you want law enforcement. You don't want cops like patrolmen wearing masks and not wearing badges and not identifying themselves. That's a separate conversation, though, because these are not patrolmen, law enforcement officials on patrol. These are, in my opinion, a military campaign, soldiers in a war being deployed to repel an invasion. And if we adopt that framing when we look at it, I think it becomes a much easier conversation to navigate.
We do actually wear name tapes in the military, but our body armor is covering them.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm saying it's like you don't have your name on like a piece of duct tape on your helmet, right? Like when you're out.
Some guys do, but that's more their own personal thing for their identifying and all that. We're not. I mean, look, the last few wars we fought, I don't think I'm too worried about some guy that's, digging trenches to get irrigation because they don't have a pump for a sprinkler system. I'm not worried about him coming over to the United States and killing my family if he figures out who I am. They don't even know the concept of what a plane is.
Yeah, but there's a reason that like special forces guys, like they protect their identity, right? Like
100%.
There's a reason why those guys get their identities protected, because if the wrong people learn their identities, they could use that against them, right? And those people are sophisticated enough to go after the families at home using non-kinetic means, right? Cyber, financial, like whatever. Like there are other ways to target. And then, of course, you could send a thug to their house to rough them up. I mean, there's different ways to get to do that, and we just have to be cognizant. That's the same idea, I think, here with the ICE officials. So I'm right there with you on it.
All right, let's keep moving here. We'll jump into this story here. Well, it's not really a story. I just love to see Mayor Johnson. He's just like playing both sides of the table here. They're talking about the murder rate in this clip here and how it's down 30% in Chicago, but it's totally not President Trump's because of President Trump. Check this out.
That has been replicated in other big cities. Is the president right to say that it was his actions in Chicago, trying to bringing federal agents to Chicago, that made Chicago safer?
He is not. I mean, this president continues to, exacerbate instability across our country. In fact, where ICE and federal agents were present, we actually saw an increase in violence. In other words, the tension and the chaos that federal agents bring to cities in America, it actually is counterproductive. So yes, we saw a 30% reduction in homicides, shootings, shooting victims, all down. In fact, the city of Chicago double the amount of the national average in terms of violence reduction, because, in my role as mayor, it's about showing up for working people. We've revamped the Detectives Bureau to bring closure and accountability in the city of Chicago, 71% clearance rate. So we're solving crime. We're building more affordable homes. I've reopened mental health clinics, expanded mental health care, investing in our young people. Over 31,000 young people had summer jobs, because we know that policing alone is not going to save our kids.
So it's totally not President Trump. It's down 30%, but it's up in the places where President Trump is, where the federal agents are working. So, which means it's down even more in the places they're not working. What an absurd remark to make. Where do you think the federal agents are operating out of, Gordon? They're operating out of the most dangerous places in Chicago. They're operating out of the places where there's drive-bys and gang violence and where, there's clusters of these, gang activities. What an absurd thing to say. But hey, he has to acknowledge that crime is down 30%. And the people of Chicago, I think they're looking at this and they're saying, you know what? This guy's absolutely retarded. Crime is down 30% here. It's down 30% in Washington, D.C. It's down bigly in Memphis. Every place that President Trump is conducting these operations, crime is plummeting. And there's a reason for that. So,
yeah, I think people get really frustrated with a lot of this stuff, and I understand why, rightfully so. I mean, this is very frustrating to witness and to observe and to deal with and to navigate. But however, pattern recognition, I think, is like our job, not just like here on Badlands or just as like people who do podcasts or write articles or whatever, just as anybody who's participating in this battle space, anybody who is dedicating their time and energy to this stuff. Pattern recognition is your job, because that pattern recognition is a survival skill. It's how animals survive in the wild. It is how human beings have always survived, is recognizing patterns and then anticipating, all right, I shouldn't go into the jungle where I know a tiger lives, right? The pattern that I've noticed is that Trump is allowing some of this stuff to play out to a certain extent so that people like that get on television and firmly establish their position.
Yep. So
that when the time comes to drop the hammer, there is no debate about where they stand, versus just going out and arresting everybody that, on suspicion, who is involved in this, who's been communicating secretly or whatever. And then all of a sudden you turn them into a martyr. And then all of a sudden the argument becomes, well, were they actually involved? Is that even actually their position? Can you prove that they were actually going to engage in a subversive takeover of the US? We know that they are firmly out there. We will subvert and help these invaders however we can subvert Trump because Orange Man bad. That part of the conversation cannot be debated when the time comes. The debate will then become, is this a foreign invasion? And was there a conspiracy to actually destroy the United States through an invasion? And the answer to that, I think, is definitely going to be yes. And so then it becomes unlawful enemy combatants under the Geneva Convention.
Let's talk a little bit about this case here. And this is kind of going to segue into the next clip that I want to play, which is downright shocking. One of the most shocking things I think I've seen in politics, without, just in terms of like a personal lack of knowledge, we'll say. From Reuters, U.S. Appeals Court rejects challenge to Trump's efforts to ban DEI. 3-judge panel in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals overturned an injunction that would have blocked the Trump administration from implementing executive orders that he signed last year aimed at eliminating DEI programming in the government and the private sector. Democracy Forward represented the plaintiffs that challenged provisions of Trump's executive orders directing federal agencies to eliminate DEI programs, require government contractors and grant recipients to certify that they do not operate them. That's interesting. And work with the Justice Department to take measures to deter DEI programs and investigate companies with such policies. The requiring government contractors and grant recipients to certify that they don't operate them is a fraud that I've seen operated down here in Florida. I knew a company that that put somebody that was, I think it was Native American, it might have been a minority, on as the owner of the company, just to be able to get these grants, and then they sub those grants out. This happened all throughout the hurricane cleanup down here, all with FEMA contracts. You would have one company that would be a woman-owned, Native American-owned, Black-owned, Hispanic-owned, and unfortunately veteran-owned is also one of these categories. I hate putting veterans in that category, but it happens as well, where all they do is get the contract and then they just dish it out and they keep a hefty chunk of it subcontracting. This is interesting that they're going to require government contractors to now disclose that they're going to be that they're going to sub it out. I think that's what that's saying.
That would be interesting too. I have worked on a lot of projects where, when you're dealing with the higher level projects, the projects that involve certainly like government projects, like universities, government buildings, whatever. But even when you get into like the utility work, like energy companies, right, that aren't quite government, but they are certainly closely regulated by the government. Yes, when it comes to the subcontractors that are going to be hired under the general contractor, I've seen contracts where they are absolutely required to only hire subcontractors where the subcontractor company is owned by either a woman or a minority. Meaning that if you're a white male who owns a company, you can't even apply for the job. You can't even be considered unless you go out and you give 50% of your company to a minority or a woman. So I've seen this for years like that. I mean, 10 years ago, I was doing projects where they were doing that was the standard. It's insane. It's DEI. It's not free market. It is absolutely a socialist controlled system. That's why I laugh at like Rand Paul when Rand Paul talks about preserving our free markets. We don't have a free market. I don't think anybody listening to this right now has actually lived in a country that has a free market in their life, because this has been the trend in our country since at least the 1970s. It's been trending this way. So, if you were an adult, like if you were in college, like college age in the 70s, then you probably haven't even really lived in a society that actually has a true free market economy.
The one last part I want to read here, Gordon, the judges did the right thing, but they fundamentally, personally, they disagree with this. U.S. Circuit Judge Albert Diaz wrote for Friday's panel, quote, President Trump decided that equity isn't a priority in his administration, and so has directed his subordinates to terminate funding that supports equity-related projects to the maximum extent allowed by law. Whether that's sound policy or not, is not our call. Diaz, in a separate concurring opinion, said that he had reached his conclusion, quote unquote, reluctantly, saying the evidence suggested a quote unquote sinister story that resulted in important programs being terminated by keyword. Quote, for those disappointments by the outcome, I say this: follow the law, continue your critical work, keep the faith, and depend on the Constitution, which remains a beacon amid the tumult. In other words, he's saying, if your program was cut because it had, DEI, critical theory, whatever in the title, whatever the case might be, figure out a way to take that out of the title and still continue your quote unquote mission. And that's kind of shocking, but
subversion. That's what the word you're looking for is, subversion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is going to lead to this clip here that I want to play in just a second, but let me read this story to kind of set up the clip. North Carolina lawmakers question Mecklenburg County Sheriff's competency in fiery hearing. And I'm pretty sure Mecklenburg is both Charlotte and Raleigh and maybe Durham. Somebody correct me on the chat in there. It's the big part of North Carolina. It says in January, Representative Carla Cunningham and 4 of Sheriff McFadden's former employees filed a court petition accusing him of misconduct and extortion. The petition was later dismissed for procedural reasons. However, the filing alleged that the sheriff told Cunningham to vote down certain legislation stating, quote, I don't want to see you get hurt. You live in my county, end quote. What the fuck? That's a pretty bold threat for a sheriff to make at a legislator. Like, vote this down. You live in my county. I don't want to see you get hurt.
Yeah. What, why, sir, would they get hurt if they voted against this? Like, can you explain your statement there? Because I mean, he's a law enforcement official. He knows that he knows better than to say something like that.
Now, listen to this. McFadden was also accused of mismanaging resources, including directing on-duty deputies to drive people to bars and strip clubs in county-owned vehicles. McFadden also refused to comment on inmate deaths, citing 5 ongoing lawsuits. Since he took office in 2018, 21 inmates have died. Asked how he's recruiting staff, McFadden said he's asking people to speak positively about the sheriff's office. And he argued that ICE has given law enforcement a negative image, as this dude's got inmates dying, deputies driving people to strip clubs, and threatening legislators. But yes, it's totally ICE giving you a bad image. Asked about preventing jail deaths, McFadden responded that people die in the hospital every day. Yeah, you also go to a hospital because you're sick.
What?
And sometimes that happens. Yeah. Asked why former chief deputy Kevin Canty called his office a dictatorship, McFadden said black leadership is often undermined. Representative Brian Echeverria, who is also black, interrupted and said, quote, because he's black and you're black, that's the reason. So all of this leads to this shocking clip right here of just how fundamentally unqualified this guy is for his position. Listen to this.
So first, if I were to classify your position as the highest law enforcement officer in the county, would that be a fair description?
That's correct.
And as such, you made reference earlier that you're a constitutional office. My colleague made reference that there are constitutional divisions amongst responsibilities between us and you. What branch of government do you operate under?
Mecklenburg County.
What branch of government do you operate under, Sheriff?
Constitution of the United States.
Correct. That is what establishes the branches of government. I'm asking which branch you fall under.
Mecklenburg County. I'm a duly sworn Mecklenburg County Sheriff. We answer to the people of Mecklenburg County.
This was not where I was anticipating getting stuck. Are you aware of how many branches of government there are?
No.
Okay. Wow. For the sake of debate, I will move on and say there are 3 branches of government: legislative, executive, judicial. Of those 3, which do you believe you fall under?
I believe I fall under the last one.
You say it to me.
Judicial.
Okay. You are incorrect, sir. You fall under the executive. And as a member of the executive, what do you believe your primary function is?
Care and custody of those in my custody at the Mecklenburg County Detention Center.
That is part of what your responsibilities as sheriff are, sure. But as a member of the executive, your primary function is to execute upon the law, to enforce the law.
Yeah.
Wow. That is
I
a
told you that is
remarkable clip.
I told you that is one of the most shocking clips. I mean, it's not like shock. There's no breaking news in there, but to hear an elected official elected, because our elections are so fucking fake.
Yeah.
Imagine electing a sheriff that doesn't know how many branches of government there are, doesn't know what branch he operates under, and doesn't know what his job is in that office. Wow.
Yeah. And this is one of the reasons why the founding fathers were very skeptical of like a pure democracy. It's why they put a lot of mechanisms in place in the Constitution to kind of like barriers between the voters and the offices of power, because voters get enchanted with demagoguery, and there was no guarantee that we'd always have an educated electorate. And that like people who are retarded, who are mentally retarded, and I would say this guy probably is mentally retarded, can get elected, even in a free and fair system, which I don't think we have, but they can get elected because they're just charming, or they just have like that sort of thing. So, I have personally been involved in a situation where, a really, really bad, prosecutor was like got into office on those premises through demagoguery and charm and all that. And he wasn't just an idiot. He was also like he had a criminal history that I found out about and exposed to the public. And it was really bad. Like when he was in office for 4 years, he terrorized the people of this like small rural county, where murderers were just running free and people were getting shot in broad daylight. And the sheriff's office was in open rebellion against him and publicly appealing to the public to like make sure they didn't re-elect this guy when the election came back. And I helped him do that. So this is very serious. This is very real. It happens at the lowest levels of government all the time, especially in rural counties. Interesting question that he started with, what is a constitutional officer? Because at least in the case that we were in, the prosecutor was what in Virginia is called a constitutional officer, meaning a fourth branch of government. He didn't operate under his answer to him would have been, I don't operate under any three branches. I operate as outside of the three branches, a constitutional officer. Now that's only in, I think, Virginia and Pennsylvania, and that needs to be addressed at the state level. But the more you dig into this stuff, you just realize how subverted the original intent of the Constitution has been, and how awful, just absolutely awful, our governments plural of America actually are.
Yeah, I want to play this next clip here. This is a judge sentencing a man, and this guy here, the jury recommended this man be sentenced to 65 years in prison. He is convicted of robbery, kidnapping, sodomy, sexual abuse, and other related charges. He kidnapped a woman at gunpoint, forced her to perform sexual acts in an elementary school parking lot, drove her to an ATM where he forced her at gunpoint to withdraw $220, and then took her back to the school and assaulted her again, sexually assaulted her again. And the jury says 65 years because this man showed zero remorse for what he did. Like openly said, I don't care. That kind of stuff. Now, listen to the excuse that this judge, DEI, got to get out of here, man. This is unacceptable. Check this out.
But Judge Davis thought the jury's recommendation was too long. She feels he hasn't mentally matured yet and never had a real shot at getting any help early in life.
But if you were to come in here and instead of being hurt and angry, which is what this court hears, right, as a 20-year-old African-American male that has been, experienced this society, etc., and you would show that, yes, okay, this is the situation. This is who I am. I don't want to be this person anymore. I don't want to be in jail for forever.
Thompson repeatedly stated he did not care, not about his sentence, the victim, or her family. But Judge Davis emphasized she's the one that holds the pen, and regardless of what the media may think, she applies the law. To her, 65 years was an extremely long time. As she puts it, it's his whole life, one she doesn't believe should be spent entirely behind bars.
This court does not believe that Mr. Thompson if giving the resources that he can get while incarcerated is beyond being rehabilitated.
That's how America gets destroyed, by the way, like right there. Like forget Iran, forget Venezuela, forget all the foreign threats, forget Israel. Like that is how America gets destroyed. Is that Kentucky, Louisville? Is that what you said? Yeah. I mean, Kentucky's supposed to be a red state. I mean, Mitch McConnell, Rand Paul, supposed to be a red state, and yet you have this kind of stuff happening there, which just goes to reinforce the idea that I think the Republican Party may actually be the real problem, not the Democrats. The Democrats are a problem, but they're at least open about this stuff. That woman should not be a judge. She should be a social worker. That's her background. She sounds very uneducated when she speaks. She does not speak with the syntax of a judge on the bench. And yeah, this is obviously outrageous. And the fact the guy was sitting there disrespecting her, interrupting her as she's speaking. In my experience with judges, because there are plenty of really good judges out there, you do that to a judge and the judge is going to stop you and say, you know what, 65 years isn't enough, 80 years. Like I've seen judges, because a guy swore like as he was getting sentenced, and the judge said, you know what, it's not 7 years, it's 15 years now. 15 years because you said MFer to me as I was reading you your sentence. So it's going to be 15 years instead. Like that's how judges typically respond to disrespect like that, because you should respect the law. You should respect the court, at least like when you're in the presence. And you should respect cops, by the way. Like when you get pulled over, you shouldn't spit in the cop's face. You shouldn't, yell at a cop in his face. It's like there's a time and a place to fight back if you need to. And it's not in the moment when you're engaging with like the officers of the law, officers of the court. So anyway.
We had the video of Ghislaine Maxwell's deposition came out yesterday. And kind of interesting. I mean, she pled the fifth on everything, so we didn't get anything interesting from her. However, as they're opening up, the attorney said something that was a little bit interesting. Also, a lot of people are pointing out the painting behind her and how that is very reminiscent of a Q post. But here, check this out.
Can the witness please state her name and spell her last name for the record?
Before she does that, this is David Marcus, and I just wanted to introduce her and make a brief statement. So members of the committee, on my advice, Ghislaine Maxwell will respectfully invoke her Fifth Amendment right to silence and decline to answer questions today, even though she would very much like to answer your questions. She must remain silent because Ms. Maxwell has a habeas petition currently pending that demonstrates her conviction rests on a fundamentally unfair trial. For example, jurors lied during voir dire to secure seats on the jury, and the government promised immunity and then broke that promise. Newly discovered documents now demonstrate these facts conclusively. If this committee and the American public truly want to hear the unfiltered truth about what happened, there is a straightforward path. Ms. Maxwell is prepared to speak fully and honestly if granted clemency by President Trump. Only she can provide a complete account, and some may not like what they hear, but the truth matters. For example, both President Trump and President Clinton are innocent of any wrongdoing. Ms. Maxwell alone can explain why, and the public is entitled to hear that explanation. Thank you, members of the committee, for having us today. Ms. Maxwell can now proceed to answer.
Very interesting. So Clinton and Trump are completely clear of any wrongdoing. Now, I mean, Trump, I think we all understand that. If there was something on President Trump, it would have come out by now. Something, damning. Nothing came out, of course. And, it upholds or lends credibility to the informant theory. But the Clinton thing, that is a really hard one. And I'm not saying this as a Trump supporter and all that. I'm saying this as somebody that saw what the Clintons did in Haiti, that's seen what the Clintons have done elsewhere, that saw, the amount of engagement they had with Jeffrey Epstein, to the island, to the White House, all the photos that have come out and everything else. I mean, we're talking intimate photos, not the casual, we're at a party and we just happen to be next to each other and got a snapshot, sitting in the jacuzzi together, those kinds of things. And so that's really interesting to me. I'll let you comment on that, but then we have a conundrum that we're up against. And this is something I talked about maybe a year ago with the P. Diddy stuff, but
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting. Keep going. You said you have something else you want to play.
Well, no, I don't have anything else to play from that. I had more that I wanted to add to that.
Add to it, and then we'll comment.
Well, this is the conundrum, and I talked about this when we were doing the Diddy case, and I think it might have actually been in reference to Epstein. I don't remember, but do you? This is the question, the catch-22. Would you commute the sentence of Ghislaine Maxwell if it led to tearing down the entire infrastructure that was around their pedophile, child trafficking, sex trafficking operation, and brought down the people that have been beholden to the blackmail from the intelligence? I think we all know that they've been handled, right? That Epstein and Maxwell were being handled by intelligence agencies, whether CIA, Mossad, FSB. That's what they're trying to push now. Is it worth it to commute her sentence in order to bring down that system?
Okay, so this is that's a great way to frame it. That's a good way to frame the question. And the answer probably is yes. However, we also need to just be like cognizant of a few things. We are, as like armchair analysts, not having all the information, can only speculate based on what we know, right? So we would assume that somebody in Trump's position and people working for him would have access to far deeper banks of information than what we have. Bicamerally, I can look at this from a few different ways. I can look at this as the bad guys put all this out there, which we've speculated for the past week, that a lot of this stuff was misinformation, disinformation, intended to conflate President Trump and his associates with people who actually were doing this stuff. The best lies are woven with threads of truth. If that's the case, you could also look at it like this. Well, maybe the people who work with Ghislaine Maxwell put this stuff out there and framed President Trump to make it look like this in order to create the opportunity for the lawyer to come out and say, hey, if like she will exonerate you if you just let her off, you let her out, right? That could be one way to look at it. Now, I also look at this from, how do these crime syndicates work? I think that none of them value any individual member over the group. Like they're ready to burn any one of them in order to save the rest of them. They're thick as thieves, right? So like the idea that they're going to go out of their way, they're going to bend over backwards to save Ghislaine Maxwell seems a little fantasy. Like that seems a little like cartoonish to me. All things equal, does giving her clemency in exchange for information, testimony, et cetera, that is absolutely going to build a RICO case, like a airtight RICO case that brings down the entire network. Yeah, that's probably a deal that I would make. I would probably make that deal. But there's a lot of ifs in there. There's a lot of unknowns in that. A simple testimony that puts away one guy or puts away a few guys, I don't think that's enough. I think it would need to be absolute like airtight data that brings down that implicates the whole network, and something tells me they probably could get that information without her assistance.
I mean, maybe, perhaps,
maybe,
but you're not going to get. Nothing is going to be more credible. Well, maybe not credible, but more reliable than her testimony. Because not only is her testimony going to be, admitted, but she can probably point you to certain things, evidentiary things that you'll be able to obtain. I am of the belief that, yes, I would commute her sentence in order to bring down the entire network. However, there's no guarantee, and that's the conundrum, is there is no guarantee that it's going to result in that. But on the other side, you got to think, man, what did Q say? These people will not be able to walk down the streets. And that's exactly what's going to be the rest of her life, right? She might be able to get away to the island or something like that. But wherever she is, she's either going to be a recluse somewhere, a hermit living in the middle of nowhere, or she's going to be looking over her shoulder every single place she goes for the rest of her life. And that might be more torture than actually being in a cell and whatever. So
well, I would expect her to be on like some form of parole. Like she would be. She couldn't just travel the world. She would be contained at the very least to the United States, but maybe even to a certain state.
Well, St. James I think it's part of the Virgin Islands. So
I would probably would put restrictions on her, like getting on an airplane, like in general, right? I mean, there'd just be a lot of, I think, restrictions. But going back to what you were saying before, yeah, I mean, here's the thing. If they have like the people, they're like, all right, here's the list of names that we have. And what we're asking of Ghislaine Maxwell is to come in and basically like give us affirmation, give us affirming testimony that these people were actually involved. That to me is not a credible testimony, because she knows, all right, if I just say yes, 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 I get to walk out of this prison. That's not a credible testimony. If you bring her in a room and you just sit her down with a legal pad and you say, all right, tell us everything from start to finish, write down everything. And she writes down everything and she affirms a lot of the stuff that you already know through that process, but then also like brings new names, new entities, and like builds out the network for you. And then you go with like a warrant and track that down and you validate all of it. And you're like, okay, this is all like, yep. Like she helped us get everybody, right? That then there probably is worthwhile. But again, this is very subjective. Like, I don't think it's a black and white yes or no. Yes, I would give her clemency in exchange for testimony. I would be willing to offer her clemency for the right testimony, for the right conditions. And I'm sure that's all being weighed and measured. I would expect, I would assume, I would hope at those levels.
All right. Before we move on, I got one more Epstein story that's going to be that will segue us into the geopolitics. So I'll hand it over to Ghost here in just a moment. But before we do that, got to talk about another sponsor. When was the last time you woke up and you actually felt rested and got through a day without feeling totally stressed out? Well, over 50% of adults say they'd feel better if they got more sleep, and stress is often the biggest barrier. That's why CBD from CB Distillery makes so much sense. CB Distillery has natural solutions for sleep and stress that can help break that vicious stress-sleep cycle. And everything from CB Distillery is premium quality, third-party tested, and free from artificial dyes or fillers. They're the source that I trust, and so do 2 million other happy customers. You can shop by benefit, whether you want better sleep, less stress, improved focus, pain relief after workouts, or even something for your pets. It's all right there. You just click the little link. It's got it up at the top, what benefits you want. You just click it, buy the product. I take the tinctures, the gummies. My dogs take the tinctures. Fantastic products. So if you're ready to start sleeping better, stressing less, and just feeling good again, check out CB Distillery. Visit cbdistillery.com and use promo code Badlands for 25% off. Again, that's cbdistillery.com. Promo code Badlands, cbdistillery.com. Specific product availability depends on individual state regulations. And give me 1 second. I got something caught in my throat.
Clutchworks in the chat says if everything boils down to the testimony of Ghislaine, then we failed. And I would tend to agree with that. I think if we become dependent on her to like get quote unquote the truth, then we have monumentally failed at some point. So,
I disagree. I disagree. And I've said this for a long time. Epstein was not keeping these records for himself. And the stuff that we're getting is circumstantial at best, right? We have it's not
that we're getting. Yeah. The public's getting is circumstantial at best.
Well, yes, but we think that there's some like secret trove of documents that are like outlining the specific crimes that they committed. Maybe there are, but you're not going to get as much. Like, I don't think we're going to see the video evidence that people. Well, first off, we'll never see it.
You're never going to see the law,
right?
Just put that out of your mind. You're never ever going to get that level of affirmation.
But do they even have it? Was it ever in Epstein's possession? If he was an intelligence asset and he was being handled, this stuff was being used for coercion and blackmail, it's not going to be in Epstein's possession. It's going to be in the people that are doing the coercion and the blackmail. And that would be the intelligence agencies that were handling him. I could be wrong on this. I very well could be, but we haven't seen anything as a result because of the pushback from the intelligence. Alex Acosta, right? This is in intelligence hands. It's above my pay grade. So I don't know that we can get accountability that way. We saw the report that I read the other day from Jorge Gonzalez in Mexico talking about all that, and we got no accountability for that. And that guy's evidence, I mean, that guy's dead now. and who knows the circumstances around his death. But
well, ultimately, it kind of comes down to what you think. Like, how important do you think Ghislaine Maxwell was?
I think she's very important. That's the thing.
Maybe. I mean, my like assessment of her is that her father was very important. Her father was absolutely critical to establishing the intelligence community in Israel. Her father was absolutely critical to serving the British intelligence interests throughout the latter 20th century and basically acting as their infiltrator into the Soviet Union. So yeah, her father was incredibly important. And her father, as we know from these drops, introduced her to Epstein and basically was the one who like handed her off to Epstein. And basically the official narrative that we're told is that Epstein was supposed to take care of her after her father was gone. That's kind of somewhat the official narrative. I look at her as like a socialite. You know, she's a socialite from London who knows everybody because of that lifestyle. Certainly could have like intelligence training, certainly could have like that whole background. The fact that she's a submarine driver, like she has a submarine license, that's pretty odd. It's a pretty unique skill set. But you know, at the end of the day, I think she herself probably had, I mean, certainly had handlers. Like she had people above her, right? Like she was being handled too. And when did she start doing this work? If she was even doing the work in the first place, which I think she probably was. Did she start doing it after her father died? Because if that's the case, then my inclination would be that her father was buried in debt. I mean, the reason I think her father was killed was because he went to the Mossad and said, I have done everything to build this organization into what it is. Like, I'm the guy. And they're very open about that. They gave him a state funeral because of that. I need $400 million right now or I'm going to expose all your secrets. That's what he said to him. And so they killed him. So I wonder if they turned around and they said, hey, if you want to continue to live the lifestyle that you've enjoyed your entire life, you're going to do this for us, right? That makes her a pawn. And if you're that kind of a pawn, I can't imagine that you are getting access to the kind of intel that we are all assuming she had access to. That's my point. So like how powerful would her testimony actually be? You know, beyond being able to say, yes, I ran into that guy. Yes, I dealt with that guy. Yes, I filmed that guy doing this. You know, but does that testimony change anything? That's the question.
Yeah, I mean, if she is the spy that we assume she is after Robert Maxwell, did she create backups? Is there a dead man switch somewhere? Is that why she's still alive in this prison system and able to move freely from medium high security to a prison camp, essentially, where she's got nice pillows and a view and time outside, you know, and all that stuff? I don't know, man. I don't know.
Maybe, but you know, spies are also like compartmentalized themselves, right? I mean, you can't imagine that like the brain at the center of the whole operation is like entrusting one spy with everything, right?
Yep. All right, so let's jump into this story here from The Guardian. 2 senior Norwegian diplomats being investigated over Epstein links. Norway's Financial Crime Squad is investigating Mona Juul, who resigned as ambassador to Jordan and Iraq on Sunday on suspicion of gross corruption while working at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They are investigating her husband, Terje Rod Larsen, a former diplomat and former president of the International Peace Institute, on suspicion of complicity in gross corruption. The couple were a part of a small group of diplomats facilitating the 93 to 95 Oslo Accords. The revelations have sent shockwaves through the Nordic nation, chiefly because the U.S. financier, meaning Epstein's, relationship with Crown Princess Mette Marit, who also because of his ties to other notable figures. Now, this is where it gets a little bit interesting. The files appear to show that Juul and Rod Larsen's 2 children were bequeathed $10 million by Epstein, and that Larsen was appointed executor of Epstein's will in 2017. That was later revoked. They visited Epstein's private island with their children in 2011, and Rod Larsen later thanking the American for the trip and describing the island as, quote unquote, totally unique. We all loved it, Larsen wrote in an email before adding, Mona sends a kiss. And then the most fascinating part is that Juul was a former ambassador to Britain and Israel. And she was an ambassador to Israel from 2001 to 2005 and to the United Kingdom from 2014 to 2018.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like all these people who tend to be connected to the Oslo Accords and just the two-state solution in general, who also have ties to Epstein, who also have ties to like this whole network. What's his name? Tony Bennett is another one. Like Tony Bennett, I think he's tied to the Oslo Accords, if I'm not mistaken. He also was very much a proponent of the two-state solution, opposed Netanyahu. Very good friends with Ehud Barak, who appears all over the place in the Epstein files, and is now on President Trump's board of peace for Gaza. So yeah, there's a lot of like really strange patterns like that. It would not surprise me at all to see that like all the European elite are just completely captured by this, or like facilitators of this entire network. The European elite were infiltrated centuries ago, if not the infiltrators themselves, by families like the Rothschilds, by the Wahlbergs, by the bankers. We saw evidence in this latest drop that Epstein was working directly for the Rothschilds, a $25 million contract, I think is what was cited. So, you know, there's, and now of course the MSM is like, well, he was a Russian agent. He was working for Russia, you know? Yeah. So, you know, the way that Europe has gone over the past 30 plus years, and maybe even longer than that, it's obviously an orchestrated like demolition of the society, of the civilization, of the continent. Yeah, I think it's very safe to assume that their entire like ruling elite class, which is a very different dynamic than we have here in America, because you're talking about bloodlines and that kind of thing. Yeah, I think they're probably all involved in this stuff, or most of them are probably involved in this stuff, and it's exposing that is critical, but it doesn't surprise me that we're learning about this stuff.
Well, the floor is yours for geopolitics, sir.
Okay, I want to start because we were talking about this earlier. I didn't want to interrupt our flow, but I want to start with this hearing that happened yesterday, and I'm trying to find the best video to play. There's just a lot of really, really good ones. Let's play this one. It's a 7-minute clip, so I'm going to play like a minute or two of it, and then we can kind of move on. But this is a committee of the Religious Liberty Commission of Anti-Semitism and Freedom of Religion. And so this is a committee that President Trump put together that has all kinds of people on it. And this woman who I've never heard of before, Carrie Prejean Bowler, she kind of took the internet by storm yesterday from all the points she was making in her statements, and then really like the way that people were on the committee were attacking her. But let's just listen to this for a minute or two, and then maybe we can discuss and maybe look at one other video.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Frankel, this is...
And so you'll notice that that's, what's his name?
Dr. Phil.
Dr. Phil, yeah. So there's like, this is, you know, there's like celebrities and television characters and stuff on this thing. The owner of the Babylon Bee is on there, like Seth Dillon. So, you know.
For you. You described very painful experiences at UCLA, and I take that very serious. At the same time, many of the students who I've spoken to personally who created those encampments say that they were protesting the killing of tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians in Gaza and their university's financial ties to that war. So I need to ask you, in a country built on religious liberty in the First Amendment, do you believe someone can stand firmly against anti-Semitism, including what you experienced, and at the same time condemn the mass killing of Palestinians in Gaza, or reject political Zionism, or not support the political state of Israel? Or do you believe that speaking out about what many Americans view as genocide in Gaza should be treated as anti-Semitic? Because in my view, the United States cannot and must not make loyalty to a particular theology about Israel a litmus test for protected speech or moral legitimacy.
I just have to stop her before we move on. That was a perfect encapsulation of that argument. I think that was a perfect presentation of the argument. And so let's see how they respond.
Charlie Kirk said that Jew hate is brain rot. Some people don't have brains. I'm not going to assist them in setting a double standard for the Israeli government and the Jewish people as they fight to defend themselves. These were students calling for intifada within days after October 7th, before Israel had even entered Gaza. So it's not about them and using Palestinian civilian death, which is horrendous and horrible. They're using it as a prop. And it doesn't matter. My religious beliefs are violated. You don't get to block me because I'm Zionist and a Jew. You want to protest Israel? Great. 100% go ahead and do it. But the university let them wear masks, even though there's a mask ban. They violated all time, place, and manner restrictions, amplified sounds. It went on for years. They kept doing this time after time again. And that's what the judge saw and said, that's not okay. They can protest, they can't block Jews, and you can't assist them in doing it.
I'm really grateful that we're having this discussion because I think this is a topic that is really affecting so many Americans. Rabbi Shapiro, he's based in New York. I invited him here today, but he's not here today. He says, and I would love your opinion on this, American Jews are increasingly treated as less fully American, our loyalty questioned, our belonging made conditional because Zionist ideology falsely claims Israel is the nation state of Jews everywhere.
Hey, I just want to point out something, okay? Because that guy, like, he invoked Charlie Kirk. He didn't answer the question at all. He did not give her a direct answer at all. He basically said, I feel threatened and therefore, we need to do something about that. And he talked about the protesters. He talked about the guys wearing masks. He talked about whatever. He presented them as terrorists. I want to present your president, President Donald Trump, on October 7th of 2024, said this on the Hugh Hewitt show regarding those protesters.
Now, let me turn to anti-Semitism in the United States. Your daughter's Jewish. Some of your grandchildren are Jewish. Your son-in-law is Jewish. Jewish students are not safe on many American campuses. Your alma mater, my alma mater. Biden and Harris have ignored this. I mean, they really have ignored it. If you're president, will you send the DOJ to those campuses, the Office of Civil Rights from the Department of Education, to enforce the law?
100%. I mean, the law is being broken. 100%. You wouldn't think you even have this. Did you ever think 2 years ago, 3 years ago that you'd ever have this discussion?
No,
it's unbelievable what's happening. And when you see these riots, and you see a lot of people too, but a lot of the people a lot of those people are Jewish people. You know that they're Jewish kids.
Oh yeah, there are some outliers, but mostly Jewish students are afraid to be overt on places like Harvard and Penn.
That are afraid. Yes, that's true, and they should be afraid.
That is less than a month before the election. Okay. And President Trump on a show whose audience is predominantly, is purely, I think, Zionist, but, a large Jewish audience says that a lot of the people who are wearing the masks, who are doing the rioting, who are threatening Jewish students are themselves Jewish students. Where's the follow-up question on that, sir? Why are we not talking about that? Because if that dynamic is true, I mean, for President Trump to say that, you have to assume that it's true. He wouldn't say something like that if he was speculating. If that's true, then we are in a Hegelian dialectic situation where you potentially have Mossad operatives from the state of Israel promoting this stuff, like the riots and the violence and all of that, infiltrating groups, just like we did on January 7th, and basically making things look way worse than they really are, starting problems, and then coming in from the other end with the solution and saying, well, because of these situations, we have to restrict free speech. We have to basically amend the First Amendment. We have to amend this, freedom of religion, all those things. Very, very concerning. And then I just wanted to play this other clip from this woman. Okay, so this is later in the clip, or later in the hearing.
Thank you. Dr. Scott Hahn, one of the most respected Catholic theologians, he's written over 50 books. He's a biblical scholar, professor of church history. He said this: stop carelessly labeling people anti-Semites. Catholic Christianity does not in any way require you to embrace Zionism as a fulfilled prophecy. So what I've heard today is that if you don't support Zionism, you are an anti-Semite. Is that your testimony today, Seth? Yeah.
Thing on. I thought you were asking him.
No, I'd like to ask you.
Now I'm on the hot seat.
Yeah.
The hot seat. I mean, can you believe this?
Because he knows that his answer is controversial no matter what.
Someone failing to support I guess it depends on what you mean by Zionism. There's been a conversation about that today. You know, if Zionism is simply taken to mean the Jewish people's right to exist in their homeland, if you're actively promoting or seeking their eradication, then yes, I think that would definitely be anti-Semitic.
Yeah,
if
so
you're
if it's
simply
not
not
that,
adopting, but if you're thinking of the definition more of like, well, the Bible says that we have
theological.
to have this faithful commitment to the Jews and the,
Right, theological supremacy.
Yeah, you don't have to have that view. No,
Thank
there can be
you.
a range of views on
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah,
So it wouldn't
absolutely.
be anti-Semitic, just like Dr. Scott Hahn said.
No, it can be a cover for anti-Semitism, but it isn't, I don't think, inherently anti-Semitic. No, of course not.
Thank you for that. And then one last thing, two things for you. One, what was the purpose of the Hamptons hearing meeting that you had?
Yeah.
And then two, I would really appreciate it if you would stop calling Candace Owens an anti-Semite. She's not an anti-Semite. She just doesn't support Zionism, and that really has to stop.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know why you keep bringing her up and Tucker.
Well, because they're the two most famous anti-Semites.
There you
right
go
now.
again.
Yeah.
Everyone's an anti-Semite.
There it is.
Everyone's an
There it is.
anti-Semite, I guess. So if you don't support Zionism, you just said you're not an anti-Semite, yet Candace is an anti-Semite.
I think she goes far beyond not merely supporting Zionism. She calls Jews the synagogue of Satan. She denigrates anyone who.
Okay, that's enough of that. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of to her credit, that was kind of a brilliant follow-up, because she basically got him to prove the behavior by saying, oh yeah, well, of course those two are anti-Semites. So that's a good transition to this. Well, first of all, here's Laura Loomer's response to this. It says, who at the White House selected Carrie Prejean Bowler to sit on the White House Religious Liberties Commission? Her behavior today was disgraceful, and she has no place sitting on the committee. In fact, she should be removed from the committee. That's insane. I mean, she is the one like generating the discussion points. Otherwise, it would just be a love fest for Israel, right? So I appreciate her actually being on the committee, and so we could have a dialogue between two opposing sides. But then there's this. I would highly recommend. I know it's Tucker, and people have trepidation about Tucker, and rightfully so. But Tucker went to Jordan and he interviewed the Archbishop for the Anglican Church in Jerusalem. All right, and this guy is, as he will explain, he's a Palestinian. He was born in Nazareth, the son of a carpenter / fisherman. Okay. And yeah, so I think this guy probably qualified, and now he is the Archbishop of the Anglican Church in Jerusalem. So I think, his credentials are, he's qualified to make assessments on this stuff. So I just want to play two segments from this. The first being, the question is, do Christians in the Holy Land receive support from Christians around the world?
How much aid, how much money do Christians around the world send to Christians living in Nazareth?
Very minimal.
Very minimal?
Yeah.
How, really?
The Anglican Church, of course, we have partners around the world.
Yes.
And especially like in the States, we have the American Friends of the Diocese of Jerusalem, Anglican, and they're doing fantastic support. But if you kind of compare the amount of money that comes to the other side, we are talking about a drop in the ocean.
Really?
Yeah.
So Christian churches in the United States send more money to, say, Jewish settlements in the West Bank than they do to Christians in Jesus's hometown of Nazareth?
That's not a secret. That's not a secret. Everybody knows that. Yeah.
What about Bethlehem?
Now, Bethlehem is a different challenge there. I don't know if you have visited Bethlehem before, but you would see that the city is surrounded by the wall, the separation wall that separates, East Jerusalem from Bethlehem, and the occupation and the kind of the wall that separates the two countries now, and also huge measures of restrictions, of movement, and all of that is causing many people to leave the country. And now I think, imagine like 100,000 Christians in Bethlehem, let's say 50 years ago or so. Today, we have less than 30,000.
Really?
Yeah, a huge drop.
Do they receive aid from American Christian churches?
No, not to my knowledge. They might receive like projects here and there, but, like substantial money to keep their businesses. I just want you to go now, especially during the war, the Gaza war, in the last 2 years, go to Bethlehem and see what is happening.
I don't
there.
think I could.
The little town of Bethlehem is bleeding right now. There's no business, no tourists, no visitors.
I don't understand. So the American...
And for those who are confused about this, because the narrative out there on social media is that this decline in Christians in the Holy Land is due to the Muslims, who, by the way, have controlled the Holy Land for like 1,000 years. It was 85%, 75 years ago, like 85% Christian. That was after the caliphates and the Ottoman Empire controlled those territories. The IDF has controlled those territories ever since for the past 50 years. In the time period that he's describing, 1967, the IDF has physically occupied Bethlehem, physically occupied Jerusalem, physically occupied Judea and Samaria and the Holy Land. And they are the reason, actually, that we are seeing a decline in Christians. The other thing I want to play is this part. This is going to blow a lot of people's mind, but let's listen to this.
I think Americans watching this may be confused to hear that a Muslim king of Jordan is giving money to Christian holy sites in Israel and the West Bank. Tell us how that arrangement works. Why would that be a Muslim king's responsibility?
Yeah, so there's something here in the Holy Land has been for a long time, what we call the status quo or the existing reality, especially on holy sites. On Haram Sharif, many people in the West call it Temple Mount, and also in the Holy Sepulchre, and the holy sites in Jerusalem.
The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is the place where Jesus' tomb.
Yeah, which is the Church of the Resurrection, what we call in Arabic as well. Kanisat al-Qiyami. For a long time, the king of Jordan, under the Hashemite custodianship of holy sites, the king personally is the custodian of holy sites of Christian and Muslim holy sites in Jerusalem.
So the king of Jordan is the custodian of both Al-Aqsa Mosque and of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
That's correct.
And that remains the case today.
That remains the case today, and it will remain for a long time.
Even though it's extremely difficult for Jordanians to go the 25 miles over there to Jerusalem.
No, that's correct. So I think, like people like myself and the heads of churches, as well as Al-Awqaf and the sheikhs in Jerusalem, we will be the manifestation of that reality, of that custodianship.
It's just so interesting. Why does that persist today? And is that a good arrangement, the status quo that you described?
Of course it is. It's not only good, but I think for us, it saves the character of Jerusalem, where the three faiths, both Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, can exist side by side without any problems.
Wouldn't it be easier just to hand the custodianship over to the government that runs it, which is the Israeli government? Its political capital's in Jerusalem?
That will be partial, and it will be exclusive.
How do you think Christian holy sites would do, and Muslim holy sites would do?
We have. Let me give you an example where like the Holy Sepulchre, for different reasons, we for a long time during Holy Saturday, which is the Holy Fire, one of the most sacred days in the Christian calendar.
Yes.
Of course, this is the night before Easter.
Yes.
The restrictions that the police there enforce on pilgrims is unprecedented. It's something that we always plead that please let the pilgrims come and enjoy.
Now this is happening?
Now this is happening every year now. Yes, of course. Last year.
So just to be clear, the Israeli government is preventing Christians from celebrating Easter in Jerusalem?
Yes, they are preventing Christians and pilgrims to celebrating Easter, and the claim is, according to the police there, for safety reasons. But we're telling them for almost the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was built in 300 something. Okay, now that's 1700 years ago. And we have always, celebrated the Holy Fire. We always celebrated and welcome Easter. We didn't hear of somebody get banned or somebody got
They're Christian pilgrims. They're not terrorists.
Yeah, indeed. But now under the kind of Israeli law for safety procedures, they are restricting the number of Christians going into the Holy Sepulchre. Instead of 10,000, they are restricting that sometimes to 1,500. And by negotiation, you can get them close to like 3,000. This is by miracle, if you're lucky.
Okay, so I just want to like recap what this guy just said. Number one, he is describing right there the Christian pilgrimage to Jerusalem for Easter that's occurred for at least 1,700 years, that occurred throughout the caliphate, that occurred throughout the Ottoman Empire, where the Muslims allowed this to happen, right? The Muslims never taxed the church. The Israelis have now recently started taxing the church. The churches refuse to pay those taxes because they're churches. And then now there's a real problem between the Israeli government. It's really the Jerusalem government, the local government, and these churches. They are now in open hostility, basically with one another. When he describes the Hashemite kingdom, the Hashemite king, that would be King Abdullah II right now, who I've described as part of the Sovereign Alliance. He met with Trump like 2 months after Trump became president in 2017, and Trump had a lot of positive things to say about him. The word Hashemite means that you are a direct paternal ancestor or descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. So this guy, through his father's lineage, is a direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, and yet he is the custodian of all the holy sites related to Jesus. He financially he funds them, he preserves them, he maintains them, he pays for them to have like nice facilities built around them. Tucker goes and visits those places and shows you what they look like. A lot of them are in Jordan, not only in Palestine. But it is the Hashemite king. So not only a Muslim king, but a direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad who is funding all of this. And the hostile party, the party that is the aggressor towards these churches, is the Israeli government. So I think it's now time, it's fair to say, after talking about this for 2.5 years on this show, if you haven't started to self-reflect and think about this issue in ways that you didn't before, especially if you're somebody who finds themselves deeply sympathetic to the Israeli cause and Zionism, I think it's time to go there, because maybe, just maybe, you've been lied to about what the reality is on the ground there and what actually is happening. The fact that Christians in America do not support financially the Christians in the Holy Land and instead support the government of Israel is asinine to me and shameful, to an extent that I don't even know if Christian Zionism is actually Christianity. It might be something very different. It might be something actually an inversion of what the teachings of Christ were. And that's kind of where I've reached. I've reached the point of questioning whether Christian Zionism actually is Christianity at all.
I thought we answered that one a long time ago.
Well, yeah. I mean, do I think Christian Zionism is Satanism? Yes, I do. I think it is Satanism. The people who practice and follow it may not think that. They might think that they are following Christ, but are they? Like, just look at the results, look at the net effects, and just remember that the devil is a trickster and a huckster. So the fact that he would wrap himself in a religious window dressing is not at all surprising.
I said a long time ago, I think when you first started doing the show with me, we kind of had a discussion about, the mentions of Jesus in the Quran versus how Jesus is portrayed, especially by Talmudic Jews, as, burning in an excrement of human feces in hell, compared to the second most mentioned prophet in the Quran behind, I think it's Moses, in the Quran. Jesus is number 2.
Well, my understanding, I don't know definitively. My understanding is Jesus is number 1 in terms of the prophets, is that he's called Al-Misa. He's called the Messiah. There are 4 women who are considered like the most important women in Islam, and the most important of all of them is the Virgin Mary. They recognize that Jesus was born to a virgin. They recognize that the Virgin Mary is the mother and that she is the most important. And then they recognize that he is the ruler of heaven, because they call him Al-Misa, the Messiah. So what does that all mean? I don't know. I mean, I'm not a theologian when it comes to Islam, and it's not my religion. But to your point about the Talmud was written by rabbinic Jews, which is a sect of Judaism that was created around 400 AD. And basically they wrote down a book. They said, here are all the oral traditions that were never documented of how the rabbis have always talked about this stuff and never bothered to write it down. We're going to write it down now.
Right.
And one of the things they said was that Moses was given a second set of laws by God on Mount Sinai, and those the oral laws that he was given said you're allowed to violate the 10 commandments if you are advancing the agenda of God. You're allowed to lie, cheat, kill, steal, as long as you're advancing the will of God. And they also, there's going to be a faker, a false prophet who will come forth born to a whore, who will claim to be the son of God, and that person will be burning in a pit of hell, and burning excrement for all of time. And that, of course, is Jesus they're talking about. So yes, the Talmud says that Jesus is one of the most evil people to ever live. And the Quran, really the Gospel of Luke is the book that they preach, is considered one of the most important people to ever live. So it is what it is.
Yes, specifically Tractate Gittin 56b through 57a contains a passage describing the figure Yeshu, Jesus of Nazareth, being punished in boiling excrement after death, because the chat is apparently that triggered a nerve with the chat, saying that they don't believe that. They might not believe that, but the same way they tell us as MAGA that we got to push back against white supremacy, and if we don't denounce it and blah blah blah, then we're just as complicit. Well, same thing with all the other Jews out there. And I don't know personally whether other Jewish sects of Judaism push back against the Talmud. I don't know. But if they don't, then that's a problem.
Yeah.
Well, it's standards that are applied to us.
It's important to understand that Judaism is unique when compared to Islam and Christianity because it doesn't have a central doctrine. There are all kinds of sects of Judaism that are out there that preach very different ideas, as I understand it, because they don't have a central doctrine. You walk into any church, whether it's Catholic or Protestant, and you're going to find basically the same things being said, right? Because it's all coming from the same book. Same with Islam, whether it's Shia or Sunni, at the core principles, the core ideas are all the same, because it all comes from a centralized doctrine. That is not the case in Judaism. But rabbinic Judaism, which came out a few hundred years after Christ, that influenced, as I understand it, most of the sects of Judaism. So does every Jew in the world believe that? I don't know. It's not my authority or my inclination to answer that. But rabbinic Judaism, which is the form of Judaism practiced in Israel, along with Orthodox Judaism, that does embrace that idea that you just said. And that should be confronted, I think.
All right, so we got to land there and wrap up. I do just want to, on the fact check, Jesus is the most mentioned person in the Quran when counting all direct and indirect references. He's mentioned 187 times. By name alone, however, Jesus is mentioned 25 times. Moses is mentioned 136 times.
Interesting.
So,
yeah.
So
Well, it's also important to note that, as I learned, the Prophet Muhammad was raised in a Christian tribe. So I didn't know that. That was amazing to learn that. But you get these revelations when you learn this stuff, when you look into it and you're like, what? But you just realize how much you've been lied to.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to land that there. Please smash the thumbs up if you have not done so already. And we'll get into rants here. I apologize. I did not bring up the API, so I'm doing it the old fashioned way. And unfortunately, the pinned post right there is blocking the first name, so I can't see. Everything you want to know about big machines for construction at BuildWit YouTube. They build large excavators and mining equipment. All right. Sammy the Squirrel, $17. I can rant again. So Taco Hell is on me today. Come on, Sammy. I have not been like taco crazy lately. I've cut back maybe once or twice a month at most. Thomas Time 7, mainly because my wife doesn't work at the night job anymore, so I don't have to fend for myself 2 nights a week. Thomas Times, there's a lot of C5s heading to the Middle East. Any global news Ghost can shed or topic for SITREP this week?
Yeah, so I mean, right now all the optics are pointing towards a war with Iran. That's what the posturing is. I don't think it's going to happen. I've been very much on the record with that. This is going to be a Venezuela 2.0 situation. I don't even think there's going to be like an extraction operation. I think the Venezuela thing was very unique, but right now all of the energy and momentum is moving towards a war with Iran, and that's exactly what the deep state wants. So that's exactly what we can't give them, in my opinion.
Ugh. All right. Lee Walden, ahoy. Breen and Ghost, congratulations are in order. Your discipline and hard work and love of country is lost on this old airman. Stay the course, Marine. Bless you. The future of America is in good hands. Thank you, Lee Walden. God bless, brother. 1985, wife and I moved from Boston to Charlotte, North Carolina. Hidden secret, lots of potential. GOP strong. the liberal machine able to destroy all the good that we went there for, commie rat bastards. I've been to the Triad area, Raleigh, Durham, Charlotte, many times in my life, and beautiful place, but full of liberal college students, especially Raleigh and Durham. I think there was one more rant here. Maybe I missed it. Oh, I might have missed it. I could have sworn I saw one more. It's my fault for not getting the. Oh, I might have put it up at the top.
Scroll up. I think I just saw it.
No, it was the one from Lee Walden. It just moved it up to the top. So because the chat resets after the Rumble rants stay, but the chats disappear. So, all right, guys, smash that thumbs up if you have not done so already. We've got Badlands Book Club coming up tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern. Myself, Ash, Colonel Towner. We're covering stolen elections, and we're doing chapter 6, I believe, today. So stay tuned for that. Absolutely fantastic covering that book with Colonel Towner. Me and Ash covering it with Colonel Towner is fantastic. And then tonight at 8 p.m., I'm going to be interviewing Travion Cutie on my personal channel, rumble.com/CannCon. Travion was the woman that was interviewing Ruby Freeman in the police station that they got that body cam footage. She had a lot more time with her than that. And so we're going to unpack that conversation now that she is clear of the indictments, everything. And she's ready to speak about it. And so that's going to be incredible. White House press briefer at 1 p.m. Jessica Storm says. Daily Herald at 1 p.m. as well. Ghost, what do you got coming up, brother?
2 o'clock, geopolitics with Ghost. We didn't really get into much of a geopolitics today, and that's fine. So we'll cover all that at 2 o'clock. I just thought that the things that we covered today were important because this stuff, I think, impacts us much more directly than some of the geopolitical storylines we track because we're talking about the First Amendment. We're talking about that kind of thing. So 2 o'clock Eastern, geopolitics with Ghost.
All right. And that'll do it, folks. Thank you guys all so much for tuning in. Please, again, smash that thumbs up on your way out, whichever platform you're watching on. Thank you so much. And again, God bless. We'll see you guys later this evening.
The following ad is rated M for mature. Soft Disclosure wants you to get naked this Valentine's Day with limited edition his and her bundles that save you 20% off the individual retail prices. Proprietary oil infusions, grass-finished beef tallow, goat's milk from American goats, locally grown herbs and ingredients. Soft Disclosure is putting America First fruits on your skin.
And for these sexy bundles, we've added an all-new boar's haired beard brush and a solid jade gua sha. And the reason I'm here is because Alpha doesn't know how to say these words.
Gusha. His, hers. We need a moment to calm down. Don't hide your skin. Disclose it. Get naked this Valentine's Day with Soft Disclosure. Head over to softdisclosure.com and save 20% off individual retail prices with our his and hers customizable bundles and use promo code NAKED to save 15% off the rest of the site. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. Promo code does not apply to bundle discounts.